This conference will now be recorded.
That are really important to making sure that the overall project is a success. So I'd love to, hear from everybody on the committee. To one, is that accurate? Kind of what I just spelled out there, and are there any anecdotes or anything that you've seen or any best practices when it comes to setting up these projects for success? What are the different components of qualifying something as being successful?
Adam, for us, it's always been paperwork, checklist. And so as much of that as can be gathered before the project starts, during the contract phase, during the sales phase, always be setting the expectations for what this is going to look like for them. Because folks, we are emergency room doctors when it comes to a project. We've seen it all. We've kind of done it all a little bit to a great degree, but these folks are just walking into the hospital for the first time and they're scared to death. So it is our job to make sure that we have prepared them properly, taken the lead in it, set up all the paperwork, and make sure that they understand what are their responsibilities and what are our responsibilities. That's the main thing that I've always tried to instill when we're going into one of these projects. So it's a great subject that you brought up, Adam, and how you want to go about that process.
Maybe I would just add on, I think from the video surveillance side, a lot of times you're in a situation where the customers don't know what they don't know. Sometimes they do, but maybe it's a situation where you have to ask why 6 times, open up a topic, because there's always something that happens at the end that can screw you up very easily. And if you just asked a number of questions and pulled it out of people, beforehand, you could have avoided the situation.
Do you, in working with different partners in this industry, do you feel that our partners have a good process internally, right? We've got different size organizations that we partner with, really, really large ones that cover multiple states and have, 100+ field techs, and then we've got some that, they're smaller or more regional. Do you feel like that there's a difference in the process dealing with a larger partner or with a smaller partner? I don't know that there should be a difference, but is there any difference there in how you interact during a project?
Let me ask that question too, Adam.
The committee.
Okay.
Adam, we don't. I mean, our processes have to be the same, no matter who's on the end of the solution. We still have these same priorities that we have to hit. Maybe we have to explain them in a different way, but we still have that same checklist out there of things that we need to accomplish.
Yeah, I would agree, Joey. But I think, knowing what that partner's capabilities are and aren't is critical as well, right? Because, there's some partners that have, a lot of depth and breadth and experience, and then there's others that are trying to get into this and really just don't have the background, the experience, and the competencies to do that. So that's, that's a recipe for some, some considerable challenges, right? And that goes the same with the customers. I mean, the end users, the people that are buying this product, the same thing. Do they really have the understanding and the capability of, what they're getting into relative to branch transformation? It's complex, and it's not easy, and nothing should be assumed, right?
And a lot of us already have the processes kind of behind the scenes and are more than happy to share with the partner out there to make sure that they're covering all the bases that they need to, and making sure that they're checking the boxes and working through the process.
I think one of the things that happens when you have a traditional bank equipment dealer is they're not really used to all the different pieces that come into place. You know, if you've been doing drive-up lanes and safe deposit boxes and doing traditional equipment, maybe alarms and CCTV, you know, for the branch security, and all of a sudden you're in the recycler world, you're dealing with back office processes and software and things that haven't been part of the picture. And because they don't know what they don't know, it doesn't occur to them that the roadblock could be IT. You're not hooking up to my network, or that the recycler isn't recognized on the software as a cash drawer, or, you know, that there's pieces of it that they've never had to deal with before. And, you know, in my time trying to get recyclers installed, that was the thing I noticed the most, was even if they did a scope of work, they didn't really know what they didn't know, and they had no idea how to get those pieces activated. And I think that's where, you know, the people on this panel come in this recognition that there's, depending on the life you've lived, this is a new animal and a different, and it's so all encompassing. You know, training is suddenly a big issue. You know, customer training can be an issue. These are things that sometimes hasn't been in their wheelhouse before. So the checklists and the phone calls that you're on and the interaction with the customer can be a make or break it for these projects.
Yeah, and I would add, BJ, as well, you know, the messaging from the, let's say, the bank leadership about what they're, you know, looking to accomplish, what their strategy is, what the objectives are, and what the metrics are that they're going to measure success through is pretty darn critical to make sure that the folks in the organization really understand that the bank is committed to this, and they've decided, you know, as it relates to branch transformation, that this is really critical to our future. Sometimes that messaging just gets skipped over throughout the organization.
Dave, I don't think in any of the installations that I was involved with that the tellers on the front line ever had a clue what that was.
Quite often.
And that was a while ago. I mean, it was a decade ago, but I don't think they ever knew, other than the fact that somebody was gonna lose their job because the recycler was being sold as an FTE replacement, that they knew why this could be good for them, other than the fact that they could balance in 2 minutes and get out the door instead of standing there because somebody couldn't settle. I don't think I was ever involved at the frontline tellers. Maybe the head teller knew, you know, but I don't think I ever saw the frontline tellers ever know what this meant in the
big picture
branch. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say that still happens.
I think, you know, I think it's important from a bank equipment, if you're, depending on what role you play within the bank equipment provider organization, I think it's important to really think about what we're calling this, right? This is branch transformation. And so, like, to your point, BJ, if you've been a physical security provider and you haven't, so the tellers don't care where the cameras are or what angle they're at or what they're doing, or the only thing they care about is what code do I have to enter in at the end of the day to turn everything on or turn everything off when I get in. I mean, that's pretty simple. But if you think about branch transformation, it's a pretty transformative title to what we're doing, and it needs to have that type of weight to it when we're thinking about these projects and what it means to the end user as they're going forward. So I think from my perspective, when I've done these projects, you want to get all the stakeholders involved that need to be, and it's not just the tellers, it's not just the IT, it's not the ops team, it may be the security team. You've got all these different stakeholders. The bigger the organization, the more people that'll be involved. And I think that's where I've seen some of the biggest day of disasters on going live is that, what do you mean you've got to have admin access to install something on our computer? We've never heard anything. And then you say, can I talk to your IT person? And you'll get them on the phone and they're like, who are you and what are you trying to do? So, I mean, I think you've got to make sure that you've got a good plan. You know what the different stakeholders are within the organization, and step through an organized process. Joey, to your point, it's all about the defining that process. And I think the most important from our perspective, we support in pro services. I want to know who the one person is, right? One person's got to be the ringmaster in the whole thing. They've got to be, the center of the wheel that's reaching out to all the different parties and holding everything in place. And so oftentimes, my biggest desire is to know that that person understands the full picture.
Nick, you kind of run out there. You're a reseller of all of our products out there. And what do you try to do to make sure that the messaging is correct to have a successful installation, whatever you want to call it, but it's successful?
Well, they're not all perfect, I'll tell you that. And I think you have to go into that. I think all of these projects, you have to go into it knowing that some part of that project is gonna go south and you're not exactly sure what part it's gonna be. So from kind of where I'm sitting, it's all 100% about communication. It's about communicating and then communicating and then communicating again and then communicating with the communicators and communicating. And I can't say that word enough when it comes to implementations, because you can have the best process in the world, but if you can't communicate, you're not going to have a good implementation, right? I mean, we've all run into this. There's always there's always an assumption. There's always a step in the process that's skipped, because that's just our nature, is to try to get things done quickly. And that communication piece is just it's critical. It is the difference between a really smooth sales implementation and a really poor one, even if your team picks it up for you. And I'll say this, that is 100% the responsibility of the salesperson. That is not the responsibility of operations. It's not the responsibility of your vendors. It's not the responsibility of your partners. It is 100% the responsibility of the salesperson that's trying to navigate this journey with the client. So, one of my big things that we talk about here is be there on installation day, right? Just be there. Just be there for your customer. They're going to ask you things that you have no idea what the answers are to it. And Joey, it's like the emergency room at the hospital. You don't have to be a surgeon. You just have to be a really good steward for the customer and just ask them, how are we doing today on a scale of 1 to 10? What's your pain level, patient? Let me take that information and try to navigate you through the system so we can make this experience a little bit more delightful.
Yeah, bring the donuts, hold their hands. Yeah.
Well, one thing about it is most of the opportunities that we're going into, that maybe they're buying a recycler for the first time. If this part goes bad or goes poorly in their mind, they won't remember that they paid an extra $2,000 for the solution. They'll remember, and they will hear about it multiple times from their employees of, this was horrible, do not repeat this again. And so everybody that's involved is going to get a black eye. And it is just something that is very important. We all try to ingrain it into our employees that we have to make this piece go well. We have to make them understand. And then we have to be there on the follow-up after the installation, the follow-up, because we all think, ooh, okay, this is done. It is not done. Trust me on that. And in one of the things that I say in the recycler business, they will love me while I'm there. They will hate me right after I'm gone. And then they learn they can't live without us. That's just the way some of these installations go. So what that means is we sell properly, we prepare, and we follow up. And that's what we need to do to make this a successful solution sale.
Yep.
Yeah,
Couldn't agree more.
I want to agree with you 100%, Joey. I tell you, on the video side, when we have a new banking customer, we actually have our sales engineers follow up and help the integrator, help the bank fully understand the system, because if they start using it, they don't understand it, it gives you an immediate black eye and it just delays everything. So that's a normal practice that we do in March. We literally have a sales engineer, sit down with everyone involved, step them through the system, make sure they're thorough. It's like an onboarding to the system. So I totally agree with everything you said.
Yeah, because the ultimate goal is for folks like Nick and everybody to get to the second sale, to get to the additional opportunities that are out there. They've got their processes down. I think Dave said in a video a while back, we need to sell. Don't think of this as a single sale. Think of this as a progression to get them to their ultimate endpoint. Dave, I'm sorry, I don't remember your exact words. But
I call it you're working towards an enterprise sale right across their branch network. If you're not focused and setting a goal to do that, then what's the point? Because I would tell you the work and effort and the heavy lifting to get one branch up and running and successful, if that's the end game, it's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
One of the
Don't have a root canal. It'd be easier.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said, Nick, about the responsibility of sales, I think from a bank equipment provider's standpoint, I think, yes, there's a lot of responsibility on the sales side to set expectations. I think really have to think about, from the sales perspective, what does that sales process look like? And who on your own team are you going to be engaging? So let's say, for instance, you're a bank equipment provider and you've got 10 salespeople out there. Are they selling it properly? Do you have somebody on your team as a bank equipment provider that's an expert, right? A subject matter expert on whatever this branch transformation solution is, that is going to be the person beside the salesperson, to keep them honest, to keep, not that they would be dishonest intentionally, but to keep them honest from a factual standpoint of what it actually does. What does the solution do? How does it work? How does it connect? So I think, yes, it is the responsibility of the sales team to make sure that it's set up. And if you don't have that team in place, if you've got just, a bunch of rogue sales contractor folks out there making the sales, and you're not giving them the support that they need from a technical and a solution development resource internally, then that's where there is a gap today in a lot of organizations. The ones that I see that are successful have those subject matter experts involved with just about every deal, unless it's a rinse and repeat deal, especially if it's this is all brand new to the end user. You've got to have that person internally to be that person to keep everything in check.
And also another thing for the resellers out there of the bank equipment is know your vendors, okay? Know beyond Joey Jackson or Adam Jordan or Dave Pepin or Dan or whomever, know some second tier people within the organization, because there are some times when you need an answer right then and Adam's not available, Dan's not available, whomever. Who can you go to get that information to make sure that the customer feels like you're being responsive to their needs, to their requirements, and know somebody besides a Joey Jackson for a VivaTech or whomever your vendor happens to be. Engage with them and don't just don't just know that one person within that organization.
So you're using, for most of you, if you're controlling the sale, how many of you have a scope of work document? Is a scope of work part of your process?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then you have checklists for installation. You've got a pre-installation kickoff call. You've identified your key person, right? And then the day comes, and you hope that everybody does what they promised they were going to do, and they actually read that list again. So just somebody walk me through what's your process? You have your kickoff call, you set the date, now it's next week. What do you do the week before? Are you having another call at that point? Are you just communicating with your stakeholder, that person you've identified that's your key player? What are you doing at this point, on the front lines? Are you communicating with the branch? Again, if the bank will let you, what are you doing this week before? The installation's on Monday. What are you doing this week before? I'm just curious if everybody kind of has the same game plan.
Well, no, I think every one of them is dependent upon the customer. I mean, there's some of them that, BJ, we will have daily calls. Okay, you're in a monthly process up until the week before, then it may get into a daily process, because that's when a lot of the little things that have never been part of the big picture discussions kind of come out. Do I have the proper cables? Do I have the things that will bite us in the rear end in the last moment? Are those covered? And that's where you will have different people offer different ideas. I would imagine with Dan, there are a lot of little things out there installing video networks that just kind of got put to the sideline because it wasn't convenient or you didn't have the right person. Is that correct, Dan? A lot of us understand the recycler side, but the video side is totally different.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things on the video side. I mean, the most basic thing is that when an existing bank goes from analog to IP, so that is a major change. You may think it's as simple as just replacing a camera, but you have to get IT involved. I mean, when you had analog, it was called CCTV, closed television network. So you didn't have to involve IT, but as soon as you add IP in there, okay, IT gets involved, then you have to worry about bandwidth. And I'll tell you another interesting story. So now that March is part of the Delta group, we got purchased back in December. So there's another group within Delta called Amerilux, and they do very special lighting, and they do lighting for banks. So I'm starting to have conversations about them, because when banks go through a overhaul branch transformation, they totally redo the lighting. And lighting is a key thing when it comes to video, right? I mean, during the day, you could have challenges when there's too much light from the outside. At night, sometimes they put up these really cool looking lights and it just totally destroys the video. So it's been interesting just to have conversations with them, but it's another aspect of looking at another technology using a bank and how it affects your technology.
BJ, I'll add to the week before conversation. Adam did a good job talking about setting up the choreography and knowing the processes. If you've done a good job on this sales process and the implementation process, the week before is a very natural, almost accepted type of a conversation where it's very short. Everyone has their action items completed, and it's kind of like mission control with flight. Flight, are we good? Power systems, are we good? It's just a real quick final checklist. And if that's how you're doing it right, if you can go through your checklist and you can identify with all parties on the line who, what, where, when, why, and how we're going to do things, and everyone can agree to that, typically you're usually set. If you're a week out and you're answering a lot of questions, you probably need to reschedule, or you need to start bringing in additional resources to help you with that implementation, because it's probably gonna go a little sideways on you. That's just my experience. That week before is a telling tale that everything is pretty much wrapped up and T's are dotted and I's are dotted, T's are crossed.
And I can imagine that depends on the bank and the amount of discipline and structure in the management side of the bank, you know, that they're.
Well, I'll say this, a good salesperson helps people make decisions. That's what we do. We are facilitators of helping our customers make decisions. So I don't necessarily ask one of my customers their opinion about a certain subject. I offer them yes, no decisions on how we need to get to the next step. So sales is just a series of questions to get to a decision. And, you know, the implementation process should be really no different. It's, you know, we've got a schedule. We're going to do this on Tuesday, Wednesday, pick one. Right. And so a lot of clients will respond really well to that, because as you can imagine, we live in a world where we're in information overload. We're dealing with a tremendous amount of just things that we have to accomplish in a given day. And that goes for us on this call. It goes for our customers. It's really kind of uniform, I feel like, kind of in the world that we live in today. So I don't know about anyone else on this call, but it's usually very well received when you're organized on an implementation call and you're kind of driving the bus. They typically get out of your way.
Yeah.
So as long as you can manage the process, this is probably another thing that I tell my employees, and they insert eye roll pretty much every day, but I say this very often, and that is, it's simple. Either manage that process or your customer is going to manage it for you. And the minute that happens, you are on the sidelines and you have no authority, which means that that project is going to go on forever and you're never going to get on top of it. So those are some takeaways that we've learned through many failures, by the way. I don't want to say we've ever been perfect, because we're not perfect, but I will say that managing it usually is very well received by your customers. They usually want someone taking control and getting it taken care of.
Yeah. Let's talk about the employees and the situation in the branch. My experience was they weren't all there. They were all busy, right? And getting their attention to train them was a major headache. Any thoughts and comments on that?
First of all, one of the things that we do on the cash handling side is try to pick days that they are not busy and not focused somewhere else. We don't do installs on Mondays and Fridays. There's a reason for that, because you look around holidays, you look around paydays and things like this. You have to take all of those kind of other considerations into account, because if we don't have their attention, we're going to get 1,000 calls after the follow-up, and they're going to go back and they're going to say, even though we spent the same amount of time and we said the same information to them, they didn't train us. That's all we're going to hear. And so you have to look at what they're doing in their environment when you plan out your go live plan, and make sure that they are not preoccupied. And there's 1,000 other things. Are your auditors coming in the door? I don't want to be there when their auditor's there. I don't care if it's the slowest day of the week.
Yeah.
Anytime auditors come in, it's time for me to go. But that's just some of the things to keep in mind of the customer's day. Yeah. Or your customer's day, and choose something for them.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Do you get the branches to bring in extra help? Have you ever been successful with that? Is it something you ask for and hope you get?
I think something that's really important, and I learned a lot of this from Joey. So I'm always grateful for that experience. Again, if you're in sales, go on an installation, number one. Go out there, see how this works, understand what the questions are. It's going to help you with your sales process. It's going to help you do the choreography too with service handoff. If service is not happy with you, it's probably because the implementation didn't go well. And you're doing your service team, you're helping your service team by being there on the installation day to make sure that that goes smoothly. But you know, on the implementation side, I think what's important, in a couple of the things that Joey talks about a lot is fail fast, fail cheap. Get your customers in there and get them to do the work, get them to fail. You could be doing an ITM, you could be doing a TCR, you could just be doing a currency counter. Get your customers to use it and get them comfortable with failing in front of you. Get them comfortable with that. That's important. Having them fail and then relying on you to help them navigate through it, even if you're not the one to help them. That usually helps us a lot. To overcome failure is really one of the biggest things that we do in this industry, is really helping them through it, understanding that they're not going to be perfect and it's not the end of the world if it does break.
One of the other things that you can try to do, especially if this is your second or third install, is bring experience, ask to bring experience from their branch that is already up and running, because we're going to give them very generic terms on how to train them. That person that's been living their life will talk to that person in a whole different language. And they will say, oh, just do this in the system, where you or I would have to go through a 5-minute dissertation on how to do this. They'll just say, oh, click here, do this. And those folks, they appreciate that they're not having to listen to me or whomever ramble on for 5 minutes to try to get to the same point.
I think the other good thing about bringing folks from other branches is, yes, you're going to get changes to maybe their internal policy and procedures or adaptations to the way things need to be done. But the other thing too that I've seen more often than not is, if you bring in another user, you find out the truth about maybe they're doing it wrong at this other branch and think they're doing it right, and you kill two birds with one stone, right? You fix this broken branch over here, maybe Heartburn City, and you're going to make sure that the people are doing it right where you are.
That is an excellent point, Adam. It truly is, because I mean, you're probably getting calls over there from this other location because they're doing something incorrectly, and now you have an opportunity by being on site to make that correction or make that adjustment, and then both branches benefit from what you were describing, Adam.
Yeah.
You're training and retraining at the same time.
Because we have to remember, there's what, a 40% turnover in banks. That same people that we trained are most like they're probably not there when we come back for that second install, or there's a very good possibility that there is new information out there, and it's the old game of I tell my person a secret and then they repeat it all the way around, and the story comes back and it's something totally different than what we originally trained them with.
Yeah.
So everybody on this call also provides manuals.
You provide manuals, you provide checklists, you provide thought leadership. You try to do all of those things and make sure that they are as well armed as possible when they go into this process, or they bring an Adam along, a Dan, a Dave Pepin along, a Nick, whomever out there. You invite these subject matter experts to your process. It's still your process. You're just giving the customer the benefit of the knowledge that these folks have had from fighting the fires and doing the installations.
Yeah.
You know, I think one thing I have to say about manuals, BJ, is they're typically a dust collector, and they are very rarely ever. Nobody takes a deep dive into a 70-page manual of anything, right? So I think you also have to think about quick reference guides, and then the other thing too is so much of branch transformation, it cannot be duplicated 100 times. That's very specific to a specific branch or organization. And so, you know, if our system works with their system, they're going to have a little different nuance. So encourage them, instead of giving them a frequently asked questions document, let them know we encourage you for your tellers to create a an FAQ, right? This is your steps on how you balance at the end of the day. This is your steps on how you go through your audit process, and encourage them to do that investment into their process, because they're not going to read the manual. They're just not.
Yeah, we've been very successful in offering that little laminated quick reference guide that Adam was talking about. Okay, to hand that to a new teller when they walk in, to show them how to capture video or do a balance or whatever the process is. Those types of things work well together. I mean, it's kind of one of the nice things that Dave and their group have done on the ATMs themselves. That's a quick reference guide. If you know how to go in there and play that video, how do I clean this jam? How do I do this particular process? And they do a very good job from not a manual perspective, but from a on-device video perspective.
So BG, I think it's important that we transition this conversation in the next little bit from success on the actual implementation to what that follow-up looks like. And from a sales perspective, how are we moving from a successful implementation to getting the next sale and continuing the rollout? So obviously, with part of what's encompasses in that strategy is understanding what their potential opportunity is, what their appetite is, and then having that conversation up front about, you know, this is what this is going to do. This is the picture we're painting for you. If we can paint this picture at this branch, are you going to roll it out to the rest of the branches? And what are we going to do to measure the success of this in your organization? So I'd love to hear from, I really wish that Lindsay was on today. This is a lot of what she does every day is talking about this from a consultant standpoint with the end user. But what are some of those follow-up process and after the implementation to make sure that we're moving it to the next stage? Dave, I think you're on mute.
Dave, you're on mute. Dave, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I got interrupted with a phone call here, but just catch up a little bit. All good stuff about the proper planning, but you know, I think it's really important knowing the background of your client as well, because separating the customer that has already implemented teller cash recyclers from the customer that has not done anything in that regard is pretty critical. Right? Because, you know, assuming they've implemented it, it was successful, whoever is the vendor of that product maybe did a good job, maybe didn't. Finding out that background and understanding it, because if they've had good successful implementations and now they're looking at either a refresh, replacing the old stuff, or adding to additional branches, you know, is considerably different than, you know, selling to a customer that's never done this before. So I think it's a really good point that everybody recognize that background and then planning accordingly. For example, if they've never done it before and they want to do a pilot of one branch, going through the proper, let's say, process to select the right branch can make the difference between success and failure of that pilot. So I just wanted to add that. I think some of that upfront internal conversations and conversations with the customer about, identifying the right place, right time, and the right people at the branch to, let's say, for lack of a better word, profiling, if you will, the proper place to do it is equally as critical to having all the processes and documentation and what have you.
So I'll throw this out to Dan. We probably don't do as good of a job as we should with what we call net promoter scores, but every time we do a post-installation survey, Adam, we always get tremendous feedback in terms of things that we hadn't thought about, things that we probably should have talked about, and we always get some good feedback. But Dan, I know you work on some big projects, and those are probably some like KPIs that are pretty valuable to you and your group. Do y'all do that? Is that something that's important to your business plan based on Adam's kind of call out here for post implementations?
You're talking about the KPIs that the banks have?
Well,
Yeah,
just
so
the KPIs from the net promoter score. So if you do like a post installations or a post project type of a survey, is that something that y'all do and take a look at?
we do, but it's like two sides of the bank. A lot of our equipment is typically used for security, and we're trying to get out of that as part of business intelligence, branch transformation bank of the future. And going to those people sometimes is a challenge, but we are successful. And kind of go what Adam was talking about. The first step in any video install is the video. Just putting cameras and recorders there. You go there and you'll talk about things like cool things like the analytics, but before you can do any of that, you have to have the basic system. So you get that basic system set up, and then kind of going like what David was saying, it's been really important to find the one site to do a proof of concept, say on analytics, or we have this other cool feature called operations audit where we take sample snapshots at different times during the day, and other entities like real estate and marketing use that. And then you start getting feedback on that. So on the video side, it's been a major challenge to get out of the mindset that it's there just for video and it can be used for so much more. But once you lock onto that, and then you can start having discussions about, you can actually use video to understand your net promoter score, to understand what's going on for customers. It becomes a really good conversation, but it's a huge struggle to get there because people are just so dead set that video's there as a deterrent, as a security system, instead of something that can really change and improve your business.
Yeah.
That goes back though to the idea of, does the bank have a strategy in this, or are they just stalling equipment? And we've talked about that being a real issue. Is there an overall picture for what they're trying to accomplish, or, oh, it's time to upgrade the video system, right? And they stumble upon the fact that it can do all these other things instead of actually having a strategy for it. So
we also, one of the things we have to remember is sometimes people can't see, they don't know what they don't know. They can't see it until they have the technology in front of it. And Dan, it's a good thing. I mean, you try to go in there and expand their vision. Okay, we've solved the security thing, whatever that issue is now. Let me show you all the other things that you can do with this, or pick those 5 things and know your customer, as Dave was talking about, and then go in there. You've solved their initial problem. Now let's go expand the solution to them and show them, okay, I can see these results in the back office. This other department over here can make use of the information that my solution's generating for them. And then you've got other promoters within the institution versus that one person that you were dealing with who wants recyclers, or they want video, or they want X, Y, or Z. Now you've got other departments that are saying, I'm depending upon that now. And so now you've got additional backers to your solution and do that enterprise sell that Dave was talking about.
And marketing always has more money than security.
Oh, I think everybody's more money than security.
All right, so so again, when we're doing the follow-up, one of the things that we had kind of touched on the last call was having very specific questions, not letting them just gloss over it and say, yeah, everything's fine, was having very specific targets in your initial calls about what success looks like, what those KPIs have to be, and managing those calls. Any thoughts about that follow-up step? How do you do it? Do you go on site, phone calls? Questions, thoughts about that follow-up now to measure what's happening? You've been off site now for a few days. What happens next?
I think this is critical for, Dave talked about segmenting your customer into someone that has done this before and someone who hasn't done this before. If they haven't done this before, if this is completely brand new, this process is critical. And I think you've got to understand what made them buy in the first place. What were they trying to achieve, and understand that it may not be a set of metrics, right? This may have been a strategy that the CEO said, gosh darn it, we're doing this. Everybody else is doing it. I don't care how much it costs. We're doing it. You love those, but they're few and far between, but they do happen. But you need to know that, and then you need to know that going into it, and then you've got to think about, okay, well, what were they trying to do? Were they trying to reduce staff? Were they trying to be more efficient? Were they going to a universal banker model? So figuring out what those strategies were, and being able to quantify them on the back end. I think some of the things that I've seen, in these projects is getting the data. Sometimes it's hard to get that information to be able to quantify it. So you have to be careful about setting the expectations of what you can and cannot quantify in the process. So the best case is that this is a pet project of someone in the organization, and the worst case is that your future sales are tied directly to a 0.6 metric, 0.60 figure on a metric scorecard, and you hit 0.5, or whatever the case may be. You've got to figure out what that looks like. And I think some of those things are staffing, cash in the branch reduction, or less vault buys and sells, time savings. All that stuff can be quantified. It just takes the effort.
So I think this is important too. We talked at the beginning of the call a lot about process. I think everyone on this call is very process driven. That just helps choreography with your whole team, especially when there's more than one person. I mean, you really need to have a process for things to flow smoothly. But one of the things I think that's important to do is ask for permission before we get down this road. So as part of this sales process, you want to ask for permission as part of your upfront contract that we want to come back and take a look at the conclusions from what we've done. And when you get permission, it does something real funny. It really makes that conversation a lot easier to have. Because I think all of us at the end of the day, I mean, it is a little bit, it's like rocket science. We're scientists. We're going in, we're challenging new topics. We're developing a hypothesis for the financial institution about how this is going to make them better. We're going to analyze the data. We have to be able to look at those conclusions and determine if it was successful or not. And by asking for permission up front, it really allows that post-implementation conversation to be a much more well received throughout the institution. And it's usually a good talking point, which starts and tees up, for most people on this call, you'll probably want to hear this. It's sort of tees up the next thing that they want to look at, and they want to run it through a cycle. And then it's another project they want to run through a cycle. And the next thing you know, it's just another project and another project and another project. And that's how, I think that's how we know we're doing it right, when we have customers asking us to come back and ask them to work on another project.
Some of the things that can't be quantified in a follow-up is the teller's experience, right? You know, what do the tellers think of this? Sometimes those tellers have so much sway and control on the success of this project. Well, they do. They absolutely hold the keys to success of the project. And if they're not happy, you're busted. And so I think through maybe not what are we going to be measuring throughout the follow-up process, but who are we going to be talking to is maybe the right answer for some of this, you know, some of these scenarios where you're not going to be managing a metrics per se. It's more subjective. So the thought there to manage that is, well, is the teller going to agree to talk to, is the head teller going to agree to talk to me in 3 weeks and then in 6 weeks? And are they fully committed to calling us if they have any problems between those 2 calls? And the question that we ask on that call is, what's your heartburn? Stop talking. Let them talk and really tease that out of them, because there is a problem. There's something that's not like they thought it would be. It's just a matter of figuring out what that is and coming up with a solution.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're coming to the end of our time. I think that's a great point of ending it. Our next session will actually be at the conference in Lexington. We are on the agenda for the morning on Wednesday. And I hope everybody that's on this call or watches the video is enthused by this to come see the next step in this process. So thank you, team, for this amazing bit of content here. And I certainly appreciate that we're educating the FSPA members and helping them with their heartburn and their pain points. So thank you very much for that. And for those of you watching, I will see you in Lexington. So thank you very much, team.
Yeah.
Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, so long.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thank you.